everyone, and welcome back to the RimWorld Gun Empire series. Today, my friends, we continue expanding our empire and company across the planet, as well as making plenty of moolah off of our new clientele. And the two of them kind of go hand in hand, so as I'm sure most of you recall from the end of last episode, we had a lot of weapons as well as plenty of ammunition made up, and we were going to go out and trade that, so that's what we plan on doing right now. We're going to load all of our product up into our smuggler airplane, and then Commando Jr. is going to fly it over towards the Outlands as well as to the Thromboian Union to just try and sell it to whoever wants it, really. Now, of course, I'm going to level with you. We don't exactly have any preferences for who we're willing to sell these weapons to, as long as they don't turn them back on us before we leave, or after that, of course. Our moral standards are extremely low, so as long as they have the silver to pay, we're down for it. Interestingly enough, I had actually bought a pig off of the Thromboian Union. I was going to bring it home and keep it as a pet, but I guess we couldn't fit it inside the plane, so we actually ended up leaving it back at their settlement, and I guess it's just going to starve to death now, I don't know. Classic oopsie daisy. A little bit of time later though, when we had finally arrived back home, we pulled the plane into the hangar and dumped out all of our cargo. Most of it was silver. We had a little bit of gold, some tobacco product, plasteel, normal steel, components, yada yada, and even a little bit of juggernaut serum. Speaking of silver though, our treasury is becoming quite the little pot-bellied pig. Now, like I mentioned in episode 1 though, we probably will end up burning through this pretty fast, and you'll see what I mean in a little bit. As for now though, we have just finished up our extensive research into autocannon turrets, allowing us to build a normal one as well as a double one, and then also some handheld autocannon turrets as well. With that completed, we would also begin researching gun links. Now, gun links don't cost that much in terms of the amount of resources, but the resources that they do require are quite expensive. Although, even with that being said, I do feel that they would be the perfect accessory to sell to our Thromboian companions, as they're not exactly very adept at aiming. While Downs is toiling away in her lab, working on gun link research, we would actually begin working on our defenses and building some new autocannons to go along with them, trying to incorporate the new designs. Even though they're a little bit more expensive than the standard autocannon, I decided to go with some double ones. You can think of them like the standard autocannon turret, but times 2. Now with that completed, earlier I was talking about expanding the empire, and that is going to be true on the world map, but that also will include expanding the base itself here for the HQ. And one way that we're going to be doing that is by mining out yet another large section here and adding in plenty of growing zones. That way we can grow more crops. This was interrupted, however, by the splendid news that we had completed our research into gun links, and now of course we can create those. But that little manufacturing project is going to have to wait, because for right now we have plenty of coffee to begin planting. No, your ears did not deceive you. I did indeed say coffee plants. Now we're going to be growing these and brewing coffee, because drinking coffee should increase, I believe, our manipulation, but I believe also will definitely increase our speed. Either way, this should really increase our production for sure, either way. In the meantime, we would also have Downs go ahead and begin gestating 2 brand new constructoid mechs, as I had mentioned in the previous episode as well, to help out with repairs and just really construction in general. During this time as well, we began producing our very first mech link, which actually took much longer than I had previously expected, but of course it was finished and it is now ready to be worn and or sold, whatever we plan to do with it. Now by this point, our treasury was packed to the absolute gills, and all this silver was burning a hole in our pocket, so it's time for us to begin spending it. Up until this point, all of our production settlements for our guns and munition mines have all been in the Outlands, which does indeed make sense, but I think it's time we bring some of those to our area around the HQ, further expanding our influence and empire in the region. Now, it is worth mentioning though that in doing so, this really stressed the relations between us, the Marshals, and the Rebels just a little bit. Relations with the Rebels have dropped significantly, while relations with the Marshal Service has only decreased in about half. I mean, really, it's their fault that we have to settle these new areas near the headquarters anyhow. If they're not going to be buying our best products like our weapons, we have to make money somehow. And that's why we've settled these new areas, as well as why we're upgrading them all, not only the ones near the HQ, but the ones back in the Outlands as well, to just try to further increase production as well as their military capacity. And as you can see, after all the upgrading and settling was done, we are quite a bit shorter on silver than we were before. Like I mentioned, we would begin burning through it quite quickly, but that's quite alright. It is well worth it. I did, however, feel like we needed some proper security measures inside the treasury itself, since it is growing quite large and is containing literally the entire sum of our empire's wealth. However, it's worth noting these turrets that we built on the inside were no normal turrets. No, they were actually ceiling-mounted mini-turrets, making them a bit harder to spot by any ne'er-do-wells. I also noticed that the pig that we purchased previously and left behind in the tribal territory wasn't dead. Apparently it's not going to starve to death, and I don't know why I thought it would this soon, because it can indeed graze. Perhaps we should send out a rescue mission. Maybe. I'll try not to forget to do that, but for now we have some other things that we need to focus on, such as this new shelf that I'm actually going to be adding to our pillbox here, where we defend the base normally. Now, specifically, this new shelf that we have built is going to be for our serums, such as Juggernaut Serum and Metal Blood Serum, because this is, as mentioned, where we always go to defend the base, and we're going to be right next to them, so they're there if we need them, essentially. Some time later, we ended up having a trader from the Outlands coming to visit and looking to buy some of our wonderful firearms and ammunition, I'm sure. They weren't affiliated with any faction, but of course we would do some trading with them, at which time I realized that they had plenty of car parts for sale. As for most car parts, we could build them on our own, but it would be much easier to go about buying them, but some of them we actually couldn't even build because we need to go on the roads looking for wrecked vehicles, as is part of the mod, and that's just something we haven't had time to do yet. Thanks to the parts that we had purchased, though, we would be able to build a brand new type of truck. However, in the middle of constructing said truck, we would have a little bit of an issue. I'm afraid to say that a group of insectoids have burrowed in stasis cocoons just outside of our defenses because of our tox packs that are in the area laying out on the ground. I knew this could happen, but I'd still let it happen like a fool. Well, there's not really any point in dwelling on it now. It's already happened, and we have a huge group of insectoids to take down. It would appear that they have surrounded Min, and they would quickly take her down as well. It would now be up to the others to attempt to rescue her, assuming that is that they'll even be able to withstand the bug onslaught themselves, which given the amount of them is asking for a lot. Shinichi, on the other hand, was putting in a hell of a lot of work with his chainsaw though. It really did help us out tremendously though that the Outlanders were willing to help us. Not that they really had that much of a choice, as the insectoids were trying to kill them as well. Still though, the sentiment was nice and the teamwork really helped. As we and the Outlanders were keeping the insectoids busy, Shinichi would sneak down around our defenses and try to rescue Min, which he did end up successfully doing, thank God. And then by this point, our mercenaries, along with the help from the Outlanders, had defeated the bugs, except for the ones that were lying on the ground that needed stabbed in the head a few times, but we didn't mind helping them. With the battle finally over with and everyone back in their rooms in the base trying to heal up, our constructoid would actually end up finishing our new truck, and boy oh boy is this a splendid little ride. The perfect mule for hauling our mercenaries as well as any resources around, though we will need a name for it. Speaking of which, last episode I asked you wonderful people for some wonderful names for our current vehicles as well as our iguana, and one of the first names that we actually have here today is for Scott's muscle car, and we are going to be naming it the Outrunner. A cool ass name from our cool ass friend Caden Short 254. It is apparently a Borderlands reference, but I never played the game, but I've seen it. But thank you for the name, I love it. Next up, we have our smuggler airplane, which we are going to be promptly naming the Eye. Now, we were given two choices here by our friend, the Eye or Scott's Eye. Well, Radiant Peace 8457, I've decided to go with the Eye instead of Scott's Eye, simply because Scott, in my opinion, is less militaristic and more diplomatic, I guess, so we don't exactly want his name striking fear, I suppose. We just want him well known. And also, I just like the Eye better, I guess. Last but not least, we will also be naming Iguana 1 Parthenax. A really solid ass name. I really like this one as probably one of my favorites, especially since the iguana is basically plain white, just as Parthenax. And we have our friend Kraken Egg 6261 to thank for that, so thank you ever so much, and thank you to everyone who submitted names. I always really appreciate the suggestions you guys make, especially for names and everything, and I have a really good time even looking at them. Even if they don't get chosen, just know that I do very much enjoy them, of course, and I do try to look at all of them. Now, with all that being said, though, after some time had passed, we had finally gestated 2 of our Constructoid mechs, and I think for now that'll be all that we add, as we do need to build some rechargers, and we're running a bit low on resources, so I essentially don't want to build too many mechs and we not have enough charging stations for them. But even with just the 2 that we currently have, we should be able to do some construction as well as repairs much faster now. Now, by this point, our coffee plants had fully grown and were ready to be harvested. Don't mind the flashing power outage there. We were experiencing an eclipse and it was causing a few problems. It would seem we'll need to make some more improvements to our power grid, but for now we have coffee to brew, baby. Nothing like a warm cup of joe to get the blood pumping and to get us energized to go and produce some more weapons. Well, actually, in particular this time we're working on some helmets that only require some plasteel, some components, and a little bit of metallic resources, which we are using rebar concrete for because, well, we're running just a tiny bit dry on steel and other resources, I'm afraid. Now, we could most definitely send out a team and set up camp and begin trying to mine some of these resources, but since we don't have a lot of mercenaries under our control here at the HQ, that's going to take a really long time. So instead, I've decided to go out and trade with the Marshal Service as well as the Rebels, even though, as you can see, the plane doesn't really have that high of a cargo capacity, so we barely get any steel back, but that's okay. I guess we'll just have to make several trips. Trading with the Marshals and the Rebels should also help us keep at the very least some decent relations with them. In the meantime, though, while we're doing that, we're also going to be working on some Molotov cocktails that don't require any steel. They do require chem fuel, though, so we'll have to continue purchasing more of that and making some out of what little bit of wood we have. Now, I have noticed a little bit of a shift in the tension around the base between Downs and her husband, Richard. Yeah, if you're new here, maybe you don't know that they're actually married, or perhaps you forgot. They were taking a little bit of a break and sleeping in separate rooms for quite a while there after Richard found out that Downs was cheating on him with one of our Neanderthal slaves. But it would appear that they are now making up and things are somewhat hunky-dory. Well, not quite. Rulant is still considered her lover. Something needs to be done about that. Rulant was initially enslaved as part of his punishment for being Downs' little honey mustard suckle. But that's not good enough now. Being the grand rifle company that we are and making the allies that we have so many other punishments in store. And as you can see, Rulant is no longer in the slave quarters. He is now in our prison, and as a prisoner, we can do whatever we please with him. Well, we could anyways, but this is more symbolic. We've recently heard that the Citadel is setting up a labor camp in the Outlands for mining and farming, and just anything in between, really, cleaning up the shit in their new stables. So that's where we're going to be sending him. With Rulant gone, there would be no one to come between the love and the spark that is Richard and Downs. Well, except for this extremely large group of raiders, or groups I should say, from the Confederacy of Banya. I'm sure they would love to get in between all of us and maybe cut off our faces or something. One of them is actually the father of Greffus, our mercenary. It's a real family reunion. But something tells me that her father isn't coming over for a glass of sweet tea. No, I think he might be coming to kill us with all the rest. The first group had arrived and we immediately got to see our autocannons in action against some humanoid figures. Needless to say, we were not let down by their performance. Though most of the murders were still taking place by all of our members that were hiding out in the pillbox under their ample cover, hidden behind our diabolical embrasures. Eventually, we had killed enough of them that the first group decided to flee like the cowards they are back into the desert dunes. The second group of raiders raiders was faring a bit better against our defenses as they were just out of reach from our mercenaries, unfortunately. This would be the reason that the turret on this side always has to be replaced, as they seem to just crowd around it and destroy it before coming to get their asses kicked. However, this did give us an opportunity to look throughout their ranks, and we managed to find 2 impids who used to belong to the Mountain Devil Mafia. It would seem that they've been integrated among the tribe of the Confederacy. Either way though, this felt like a really good time to try out some of those serums that we had purchased, giving Shinichi a metal blood serum. This, accompanied with the coffee that he had drank before the battle, meant that not only would he be very durable, but he would also be pretty fast and be able to catch up with the Confederacy members. An ample opportunity to use his chainsaw. Didn't even know what hit him. He began chasing down the last remaining members, even taking a few shots here and there from them. That metal blood serum really does seem to work, as it made him almost completely impervious to damage, matched alongside with his sophisticated armor. But in the end, I'm afraid they did end up escaping our grasp just by a hair. We almost had them. There's always next time, but as for right now, we did manage to keep one of them alive long enough for us to take her prisoner. And maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I think she should be grateful because she could have turned out like all of her comrades. I always find it quite interesting to see all of the different apparel styles throughout the many tribes that make up the Confederacy of Banyam. Much easier to get a good view at their different apparel styles when they're all lying on the ground dead, or burning alive. The prisoner that we took was named Fithel, and I feel like that's a very familiar name. Perhaps we've encountered someone with that same name in Season 1. Either way, these are her stats. She has a burning passion in shooting as well as cooking, and she's also pretty decent at plants, which is going to come in handy for sure. Besides, we would need someone to take Rulant's place after we banished him to a labor camp at the Citadel anyway. In the meantime, we would begin making a little bit of a cleanup effort here, trying to get rid of all the bodies as well as all the blood and everything laying out around our defenses as the Constructoids and some of our mercenaries began repairing our defenses. However, this was rudely interrupted when our slave Machu decided to rebel against us. Our enslaved peoples here normally go out and cut down cacti, that way we can use the wood for chem fuel, and this normally means that they automatically equip axes, which actually give them a little bit too much courage, resulting in rebellions and sometimes death, unfortunately, as well. As you can see with Machu, it would appear that Kirkos shot him right through the torso, turning it into a fine mist. Well, it would appear that we now have 2 of our enslaved workers that we need to replace. Because Machu decided to rebel and go out in a very dishonorable way, we're not going to be giving him an honorable burial. No, we're going to be chucking grenades onto his carcass until it is completely gone. This may seem a bit taboo and a bit awful and cruel, but, you know, let it be an example to the others that we still have, perhaps. We run a tight ship around these parts. Now, with the flames of rebellion against us squashed and extinguished, I thought it was time that we begin working on some more car parts so that we can build more vehicles. Last season, we had a lot of vehicles, and I feel like this season we've hardly had any, even though it is just episode 2. I mean, we still are warlords after all. It seems like it would be fitting for us to have some damn vehicles to extend our power, if you will. You know, like crush any of our enemies abroad if we need to, or run them over and turn them into hood ornaments, and that is why we have built yet another highwayman. We would then, a little bit of time later, end up having a slaver come from the Outlands to the base, and yes, as you could imagine, they are indeed here to sell us people, and we were looking to buy since we're currently a little bit low on mercenaries and or workers. I am a bit more interested in purchasing slaves that will join us as colonists instead of actual slaves, that way we can use them during combat situations. Upon further inspection though, it would appear that this slave caravan was run by the Forgotten and their leader Ortega. I felt that that was important to mention because the slaves that they have appear to be rebel and martial soldiers who have, well, been captured. Now at first, because of this, I thought, well, maybe we shouldn't buy them, but then I realized that all 3 of them would join us as colonists instead of slaves, and I was quite tempted, especially because relations are already sinking with both factions. Besides, surely to God they wouldn't be stupid enough to declare war on us over 3 of their soldiers being enslaved and joining us. that would most definitely not be in their best interest, or ours of course. We would immediately send them all three in the armory to equip some of the armor so that they're at least matching with our other mercenaries, as well as equipping some weapons so that they could defend themselves as well as their new home. Now with these three being soldiers in the two factions, I would have expected them all to be quite adept at fighting, except BB here is actually incapable of violence, which makes me think she probably had some type of non-combat role. But either way, here are their stats. First up we have Kate, who is very good at melee and pretty good at social, and is also very pretty, and that's really about it in terms of positives. Next up we have BB, who as mentioned a moment ago is incapable of violence, but does excel with a burning passion in plants, artistic, and intellectual. Really the only good stat here is her intellectual skill, so she may very well be helping out Downs in her lab. She's also psychically sensitive, a body modder with a chemical fascination. Last but not least is Evans, with very little passion for many types of work, but he's pretty good at construction, planting, and artistic. He's also an iron-willed, abrasive sanguine, which is absolutely perfect, as the desert can be quite stressing on the mind. Finally, we are once again increasing our number of mercenaries at the headquarters. It's nice to finally be growing once more. I can only hope that our purchasing of the soldiers, though, into our ranks doesn't cause any really ill will or bad blood with the marshals and the rebels. Uh-oh.